So welcome,
Okay.
Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well, and I'm taking a look at something which looks like Phonegap Shell on the screen,
Yeah, this
or
is
the new
Phonegap
one.
Shell, and
Yeah.
actually the reason I'm going to start with this is because part of my demo today, I was going to use Phonegap Shell to show, so I wouldn't have to publish it up to Phonegap and put it on the device and do things like that. And I discovered something when in the process of doing this that I didn't realize was in our new release that just got released Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually running a pre-release right now, and I didn't know this feature was in there, so that I was going to be talking about one of the tricks that you can do with Android, and that was handling the back button. And I found out that, well, that's going to be not handled completely for you now, but it's a little bit easier for you to do.
It's gotten a whole lot easier, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a whole lot easier. And let me show you Phonegap Shell first. The new Phonegap Shell. We had this before. We had Phonegap Shell, and basically that makes it easier for you to test your applications, because you can, from alpha, and when you do a publish, you're publishing to your local host. All my files go into a certain folder here. Well, I can just publish locally and use Phonegap Shell with some setup to run my applications and test them on a device without having to publish it to Phonegap Build and then loading it onto my device, which is very time consuming, especially if you're doing small tweaks and want to run a test, small tweak, run a test. It takes a while for that to happen. Well, someone made it even better, and this is the new version of Phonegap, and I'll show you how to install it in a minute, but I'm going to show you what it does first. So here's Phonegap Shell 2, and here's my test app that I was going to be showing today, and that test app is this test app right here. Scroll down a little to test. So it is test ps2 a5w. So that's one of the files that's sitting in my folder over there. So here's my little test page, so I can test it and then back out of it and come back into Phonegap Build. Excuse me, not Phonegap Build, come back to Phonegap Shell. So here's how you use the tool. Number one, say I didn't have any components in here yet. The first thing you need to do is you need to do a little bit of setup, and setup was made a lot easier. You used to have to do this, I believe, as part of building Phonegap Shell. You would have to have a pointer to your local machine, the IP address, so that when you're testing on your device, so that would have to be part of the build right away. You don't have to do that stuff anymore. All you have to do is, and I'll show you how simple it is to do this in a minute, but we're going to go to settings here. So here's my default. By default, and this is always blank, this is your pointer to your local machine. So I'm going to say edit server address. So I can view the server address. So as you see now, this little icon showed up over here. So if I click on that, here's my local service. So my machine is called C. Martin, and I have alpha running, my local server running on port 8080. So this is what's needed. When it first comes up, you just have a slash here. I found that it kind of required the HTTP, so I would put the HTTP:// and then S if you have a secured site, the name, and you have to have the slash at the end of it. So this is now pointing to my local alpha servers, and so I can click OK because that's all set. But the thing that's nice is I can add as many as I want to this. So I can add pointing to a server that's on another IP address, maybe a live site. I can point to it over there. So after you make that change, one thing to test is to make sure your application is working properly. And by the way, you also have to make sure that you have your alpha server running locally here, so your development server is running. So that is turned on because this won't work otherwise. And then you do a test AJAX callback, and it lets you know, okay, everything's working, you got a connection to your server. So let me come back in here. I'm going to just stop this.
Chris, can I ask you just a quick question, because we have a question from the audience, and I thought now would be a good time to interrupt. And they were just wondering, like, okay, we were looking at Phonegap Shell, but what are we actually looking at? What are we running? Are you doing like some sort of screen capture or something like that? Or are you tethered? Do you have a device tethered? Or what were we looking at?
Okay, yeah, actually, I do have a device tethered here. Okay, so this is...
What is that device?
Well, let me show you this. This is pretty cool. This is free. It's through Chrome. As a matter of fact, I asked Dave to stop the meeting early because I found sometimes that running web GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, whatever we're using here, sometimes interfered with this running, but it's part of a component that you can install. It's part of
Chrome.
Chrome.
So
Chrome.
it's one of the plugins that you can get from their stores. Is it?
Yeah, and I'm trying to
Okay.
get to it right now. I'm not seeing
Okay,
it.
sure.
There it is. Okay, it's over here. I got it over here. So, so let me click on here. If you go to a new tab, you'll have this little thing called Apps over here, and you can install new apps. You go to the App Store to install new apps, and the one I installed is called Visor. So do a search for VYSOR when you go to your App Store. And what that enables me to do is mirror my, no matter which type of device I have, Google device, mirror it on the screen. Not only does it allow me to mirror on the screen, but as you can see, I actually have control of my device here. Here's my actual buttons on my device that I can click here. So this is actually showing I can actually record this demo right here. There's a lot of nice features in this, but it's called Visor, and it gives you what you see. So right now I'm clicking on things on the screen here, but now I'm going to take the mouse away from there, and so you see, okay, that's from my device. I'm actually clicking it on my device now. But nice feature about this is that you can use the mouse to do things. So you can see, you wouldn't be able to see me clicking on the screen. That's why I use the mouse in the demo, so you can see what I'm actually doing, what I would do on the device. Click that to run that application. And it's called Visor. There are other tools out there. I used to use MobiZen, and at one point there was a build break using MobiZen, and it wasn't working anymore. And I haven't seemed to be able to get it to work well since. So I abandoned it completely, and I now use Visor through Chrome. Figure they can keep that well up to date. So
Sure.
That's a tool that I'm using to.
Is it free of charge, or is there some cost for it?
No, it's free of charge, but I believe I bought an upgrade to have more features, but the basic features are free of charge.
Great.
So as you see, this is not working now when I clicked on that, because just before I showed that demo, I went in and I stopped my alpha server here, so I'm going to have to start it again. So you have to have your alpha server running when you're going to be testing. Make sure that this is running. You can't just run it from your device without that running. However, if you're pointing to an external server version of Alpha Anywhere, and that's running, you have to make sure that's running also in order for this to work. So it's actually going to, oh, actually it did work. I finally found it when I turned it on. So there it is, finding the application.
Cool.
And then back button. And that's one of the things that I found out, I noticed when using this, is that Selwyn is handling the back button. So I said, well, how is he handling it? Because I'm going to show you how I used to handle doing the back buttons using Phonegap Build. I have to make sure that I say the right thing, because like a Phonegap Shell, Phonegap Build. I want to make sure that I say the right thing. I just lost my train of concentration. Anyway,
Man, that happens when you do webinars, I'll tell you.
The back button. That's what I was on.
So back to the back button, right? Exactly. We've got a lot of questions about that.
I found out that he was handling that. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to show you how I used to handle this, and this is the code that I used to give everybody that asks how to handle the back button. And I put it in my test application here. This is how I used to have to handle it, and this comes straight from. And let me. From Cordoba's documentation. So here's how you would use in Cordova, and they're showing basically an HTML page here, and how you would do it. You have to have create an add an event listener to device ready, and then add an event listener to the back button for the Android device, and then on back key down, do something. And right there, they're doing nothing, and that's what I usually did. As I did nothing, and basically what this does is it means the back button is basically doesn't do anything anymore. So it won't go backwards, won't close out of your application, and that's one of those issues. If you don't handle the back button, it's going to take you out of your application. So you need a way to prevent that, because people are always going to, even if you have your own back buttons in your application that they click on, people are used to having that on the device. It's something that's not on an iOS device. iOS just has the home button. Android devices, and I believe Windows devices also, have a back button. And so you need to override that back button to make sure it doesn't take you out of your application, because they can be in the middle of doing something and just be taken out of the application, have to go back in and start over again. So this is why I looked up and found out that you can, and I've been doing this since my first presentation at Alpha DevCon 2 years ago, where I was showing how I built the DevCon application, and I was using it back then to make sure that it didn't exit them out of the application. So this is the HTML version. This is what I would do in Alpha. So I would just do document.
I'd like to just do a quick restatement of the problem, because not everyone has run into this just yet if you haven't done a lot of Android development. But basically Android does have a button, a soft button at the bottom, which is a back button. And when you're using software, let's say you're on the main page of an application and then you drill down into a lower page, what you would probably expect to happen when you hit the back button is it would bring you back to the main page. But in fact, what it does is it just closes the application, possibly erasing anything you've typed into that screen, and it's a real mess. So people have been asking for quite a while, okay, how do you, when they hit the back button, I don't want it to exit the application. I want it to be able to do what I want it to do. So that was sort of the setup of the problem for today. I just wanted to get that clear, because there were a couple questions here about why Android in particular. So, and that's
okay.
Thanks.
Let me turn off my.
Sorry to throw you off track.
No problem.
Okay.
That gave me a break here.
Right.
Let me see if I turned close. Hopefully it's turned off now, so I don't get any more email messages. So here's how I did in Alpha. So here's the first event listener that I'm adding here, and that's to handle the device ready. And what I'm checking here is I'm seeing what platform, device.platform, shows me whether it's, and I have to check to see whether it's Android or iOS, and there's another one here for Windows that I don't have in here. So this is something that I'm handling in Windows, and I'd like to see if we can get this added in there also. So back in after version 6 of iOS, when they went to version 7 of iOS, a lot of people's applications broke because there's that little toolbar at the top of the screen that's similar to the toolbar that we're seeing here, but on Windows, on iOS devices, there's that little toolbar up at the top. And what happened was your application was covering that, and there was a mad scramble for everybody to go rebuild their native applications to fix that situation, because you now had to specifically tell it not to use the full screen, and whether you're not wanted to see this. So there are options now on displaying this on an iOS device. So we're going to see if we can get that added in later, so that it doesn't overlay your status bar. So I have it set to false here. But you can tell it, hey, do it anyways, or you can tell it, and there's another option where you can tell it to hide the status bar completely, so it uses the entire screen. So so this is what I had to build this event listener for, and I still need the event listener, even though a new event has been added to Alpha. We're going to add an event for this eventually, but this is how you would do it. So here's another event listener that I'm building called back button. Well, not call back button, but it's telling it to handle the back button. And then the function I want it to do when it handles the back button is right here, and here's my function and how I want to handle it. So I can handle it so that if I'm on panel card 2 and they hit the back button, it's going to catch that and go backwards. And I found out that you may want to be careful right now testing that you don't use Phonegap Shell when testing this, because I believe the overrides in this are overriding the ones in your application also. So I'm going to have to check that out and find out if that's true, if I did something wrong. So you may need to build a version of Phonegap Shell for just testing back button capabilities, because it seems to be overriding the code that I'm putting in here from this code running it in Shell. So let me go back to Alpha Anywhere here, and so this is what I'm doing to handle the back button. And yet I had to put this code in by hand. You will still need, with the new feature that's in here, to have a handler. So you have to decide what you want to do, and that handler could be blank, so that it doesn't do anything, or you can say, okay, I want to see what panel that I'm on, and based on that panel that I'm on, what do I want to do if they hit the back button? And that's where you'll handle it in code. And for example, I'm setting up an active panel to be a different panel card right here. So back to controls, so you're not controls, client side, you'll see that there's a new event in here called on Android back button. And that on Android back button is basically taking care of what I had to code before here. So I'm no longer having to add this add event listener for device ready. And I'm no longer having to add this because that's in there already. All I have to add is what I want it to do when they click the button. And that's what I did here in code, set handle back button. And so that's pretty much it. That will handle the back button. And the way I found this was when by accident today that he had it in there is if you install Piano Card 2, excuse me, had some noise going on. I thought it was my puppies. If you go to your project control panel and you do a new web component, US control, this is how you install this. You'll find out that there's a new Phonegap Shell. The old one is still in there, but there's a new one also. It's called Phonegap Shell 2 V2.
Can I just, for people who are brand new even to Phonegap Shell, I'd sort of like to paint the problem that Phonegap Shell had solved for us. If you're using Phonegap, which is the technology which allows you to gain access to the native functionality of your phone, so you can get access to the camera and the device storage and accelerometer and other parts of the phone. If you do that, you need to build and wrap up your application in Phonegap, and we use Phonegap Build, which wraps it up and pushes a copy of it up onto the Phonegap Build server. Well, the problem with that is that it can take 2 minutes or so for it to build, and if you're just making a quick change and you want to see if it works, waiting 2 minutes, could be a real pain if you're gonna be making a whole bunch of very small changes in a row. So we wanted to come up with a way of being able to really tighten up that cycle of being able to change and test and change and test, and that's where Phonegap Shell came in. Because with Phonegap Shell, all you had to do is just make the update, save it on your machine, and then have the application, the Phonegap Shell application, pull a new version of your component out. So if anyone has questions about that and want to do Phonegap development work, go ahead and send an email to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, @alphasoftware.com, and we can point you to the resources. There's actually quite a few on the Phonegap Shell. So, but for the rest of you who know what Phonegap Shell is, Phonegap Shell 2 is really quite a huge improvement. So please carry on.
Okay, cool. So what I would have had to done with Phonegap Shell, you still have to do now, but there's less steps that you have to do. So I just canceled out of there. But after you build the project, basically it creates this entire project that you see in here. And you don't have to do a thing to this. It's done. You've added it. Give it a name that you want to call it to save locally. And then after you give it that name, you want to publish it to Phonegap. And you can publish it to your local also here, but I'm going to publish, what I needed to do was publish it to Phonegap. So I have a Phonegap account. This is my Phonegap account here, my password. So that's what I had to set up. Also, some of these things are already set up for you down here, like all these plugins. When you create this project, all these plugins are pre-checked. So there's a bunch of pre-plugins that are already selected for you. You pick whether you want it to be tested on both an Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. In my case, originally I did the build here just for Android when I did my original version of testing the component. You have to still give it an application ID and give it a name that you can have to run this on Phonegap. But what you don't have to do now is put a URL for AJAX callbacks. That's what I've shown, where you can add multiple sites to point to. So this is what you would have to pre-fill out and make sure that was in there when you build it, your IP address that you're going to be pointing to for the AJAX callbacks. You no longer need to do that, and also now you're able to have multiple because it's part of this build. And once you build it, publish it, load it on your device, this is what you get here. And like I said, this is, instead of doing the AJAX callbacks there now, you're now able to make it part of, you're able to set those values right here in this. So I can say edit server address, click on that, and then I can edit. So that's where I can have multiple, and my default is pointed to my local machine here. Now, and the other nice feature here is that you can test. So I'm going to turn it off here again for a second, and where is it? There it is. So I'm going to stop the server. Say test AJAX callbacks. And eventually it's going to come back with an error saying that it couldn't find it. So I'm going to go turn it back on. I'm going to sit here and wait for it. But it's trying to find the server right now. Now I'm running it again. Server address is valid. So I have a valid connection. So now I thought it would be a kind of fun test to do, Dave, just before I did this.
Yeah.
Because I do happen to have in my folder over here, and I broke my test here just before it was about to start, because I was going to be a smart aleck and try to do this. But I said, hey, oh well, shell is in that folder, the old Phonegap shell. What if we added that in this?
Shell in a shell, huh?
I put a shell in a shell, so.
I think only programmers can appreciate that one, huh?
Yeah, so I put a Phonegap shell in shell. So here it's working. It's going to go run Phonegap shell, the old version. So there it is. What I found out was when I came back here, and I'm not sure if it's going to happen this time. Well, I just broke my application. I couldn't get to it anymore.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So don't run Phonegap shell in a shell.
In shell, yeah.
So you don't want to do that. So anyways, that's pretty much it. And like I said, the back button was really one of the ones that has been out there for a while. Also, and like I said, we're going to try to add some more features, like I believe, like for iOS, so that we can handle a little easier. So you don't have to write this code, because this is pain. Because I always forget what this code is. I always have to go back, look at a previous application that I used, copy the code, paste it in there. You don't have to do this anymore. You just have to write your handler, what you want to do to handle it, and then do a pointer to that handle underneath your client side here on our new event here. So I'm hoping to see in the future an event in here that will have it for the iOS, that little toolbar hider there. Have that added.
Exactly. It would be great if that were added as well.
Yeah.
I'm actually seeing a couple people who made that same comment here in the questions box. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to see that next, and I believe we will. But that's one thing Alpha sees what people are struggling to do and having to do, and do it for you. So basically, what Selwyn did is wrote a little function around this whole thing that was doing this. This part of it for you in JavaScript functions.
Right, the already listener and the yep.
Yeah, which you can easily copy the code, but you have to know about it. You have to know it's there. You can copy this code and mostly do it from Cordoba's site and paste it in here. It's just that it's a little different than you saw it in there. So I had to build this. I had to do this event in handler, and then in that event handler, I had to add another event handler to do this. So that was in two separate functions there, and then you had to have this finally to do something. And my original thing was just to stop them from doing anything. I was basically disable the back button so that an Android device worked just like an iOS device with the application, because an iOS device doesn't have a back button. So I blocked it so that both devices work the same.
Cool. Well, you had mentioned that this is part of a Cordoba plugin, so this sort of is a good transition to our first user question, and that is, does that back button code only work when it's wrapped in Phonegap, or does it work when you're just running it in a regular web browser?
No, I would say that has to be wrapped into Phonegap.
Right, so it uses a plugin, a Cordoba plugin to do that.
I believe it does. I can check to see if that will work if you're running it on a device. It may work. I haven't tested it with Alpha, but it may work, because this code that's in here right now for is HTML code, but I'm not that familiar with building web applications using this process here, the way you're building it using a web page, and you add the events and everything in here. So it might work. I'm not sure. I haven't tested it yet, but I will check it and find out, and we'll let you know whether or not that would work.
Yeah, that would be great. So I know the person who asked this particular question. I will get back to you about how do you handle that, the regular back button. I mean, it's basically the same problem that you would have with a web application because it just happens to be a web application that you're looking at on a mobile device. So
Yeah,
great.
so there is a way to handle it there. So that, I'm thinking it may work because basically what Selwyn, I believe what the development team is doing is building this code for you in the background because it's technically a web page. So it's building this for you. So instead of having to go in there and do this, we're doing this for you now. All you have to do is define, well, it didn't do everything. You have to define this part of it right here. That's it. And then
Right. Yeah.
call that, add that method to the event that you have access to through Alpha. So basically that's an event. So when you're adding an event handler in Alpha Anywhere, these are events that are here on the client side. So these are all events. So when there's actually an event in here, I think for device ready too, I believe that's in there. Used to be. Maybe it's handled differently now. Maybe it's on. Yeah, there used to be one for device ready, but maybe that's handled differently now.
Maybe just type in ready and see what it comes up.
See if it comes up.
On
On Phonegap ready, or Cordoba ready, or Phonegap ready. So I believe that.
Oh, it tells you right below. Fires when the component is running in a native shell that uses the Cordoba Phonegap. And it fires when the device is ready. Okay.
Yeah. So anyways, that's basically the same thing that as the on-device ready, but this is what it's called in Alpha. And I guess there are two different versions here because depending on whether you get in the components from Cordoba or you get in the components from Phonegap. It's basically the same thing, but actually I don't even know what the difference is anymore. I believe the difference used to be that this was more of a paid version, the Phonegap. Where Cordoba was the public domain, and I believe this had more features. But I think it's all rolling into one thing now, Dave. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's right. People are beginning to use the term Phonegap and Cordoba interchangeably, although Phonegap, I think, is a copyright that's owned by Adobe. So,
yeah. And
Cordoba is actually the more, even though we say Phonegap, Cordoba is the phrase that's probably much more known publicly. If you do a search for Cordoba versus a search for Phonegap, you'll see Cordoba does appear more, even though they're basically the same concepts. Another question for you here is just someone was wondering if you could just run through the process again of creating the Phonegap Shell version 2 of how you do that, how you get to it.
Okay, yes. So basically open up Alpha Anywhere. So you go back to your web projects, and just like you're going to add any new UX control, you say new, web component. You can double click on it, or you can hit the next down here.
Okay.
Select it and hit the next. And then you're going to select the UX control. You can either double click it or again click the next. And then if you scroll down a little in this list of things that you can do, you have Phonegap Shell 2. And so I'll do it again. So I'm going to say, okay, so I'm going to actually do it this time. I'm going to build another copy of it. And it's going to give you a little bit of a help screen and a heads up on the device on what it's all about, what the new component is all about here, which I just basically showed you. It builds this all for you. That's it. It's done. It just builds all this code for you. Has everything you need
in there. The shell itself is really just a UX component that's just been pre-built for you. So as that UX component, you can then publish that as a Phonegap application, and that's the shell. Now, Chris, I understand that you were working, I believe, with Selwyn over the last week or so to publish a version of the Phonegap shell up into the application app stores. Have you made any?
We were having trouble connecting. We haven't connected yet, but I have to get back to it and to see if he still wants to do that. Yeah.
So the plan is that you won't even have to do this. You can just simply open up your phone, go to the if you've got an iPhone, and go to the App Store or go to Google Play if you've got an Android, and just look for Alpha Phonegap Shell. We'll tell you what the title is once it's released to the store. And you could just get it that way. So you wouldn't even have to go through the process of opening this up. Of course, the limitation of that is that if you take the version that we've made for you and put in those stores, we've already selected the plugins, so you can't really add any new plugins to that. Whereas if you took this version, this UX component, during the time that you publish this application, you could add in additional plugins. We have the common ones, things for barcode reading. I think we even have things for Bluetooth, and we have a lot of the common ones. But there might be some specialized ones that you'll need for your application that we didn't include sort of in our general one.
And by the way,
and you can also see. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
One of the features in Phonegap Shell 2 is under settings is you're able to see the Phonegap plugins that were installed. So if you click on that, it shows you all the plugins that you have installed. And if you add any in that screen, that's the thing. If you get it from the store, you won't be able to add anything to it. But running it locally, you'll be able to add other plugins. So it gives you a list of all the plugins.
But what you're looking at here, I think, is the default set that we give you, right? Which is quite a few.
Default set, because I haven't added. So here's the default set. And those are all the ones that I was just showing you that were pre-checked back here when I was in Phonegap. We'll go back to Phonegap here again. Those are all of these selections here that are checked. But you have all these others that you can add in there also. So as you check these, that list will grow on your local version. However, you're only going to get whatever was built when we publish the application. Whatever was checked here when I say build, go build this now, those are the only ones that will be included. And you won't be able to change versions and things like that of them. You'll be stuck with whatever the version is that's in there.
Yeah, also, you've got that issue as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So, hey, Chris, thank you very much. We're going to move on. One thing I would like to announce is that there is a new release as of Monday of Alpha Anywhere. It's Alpha Anywhere, check this out, version 4.3.2. I don't really know how they come up with the numbering schemes other than they do in fact increase, but this 0.2, as opposed to having it be a dot release, I guess you would call this a dot release. Nevertheless, there are some pretty cool features in it. I've done a document, it's about 6 pages or so, writing up really the top 6 features in Alpha Anywhere version 4.3.2, and I have put that in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar control panel. So if you want to go ahead and click on that and download it to your machine, if you want to take a look at it later, that would be a good time to do that. One of these new features is Cordoba Open, which is a plugin which allows you to open up other applications on the phone and pass it files, which can be really great if you've got a special PDF reader, for example, that you want to pass a PDF file to, or a media player, or some other type of thing. We're imagining, although we haven't yet built it, scenarios in which perhaps you're downloading CAD files and you open that up maybe in a CAD viewer on a mobile device. So we actually have Sarah Mitchell, our documentation person here, who wrote a blog article recently on Cordoba Open. And if she's here, she can point you to where that information is in the documentation system and sort of give you a little overview. So Sarah, are you there? Let me go ahead and unmute you. Sarah, if you can unmute yourself. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and make you the presenter if you don't mind.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And you should see a dialog box which says that you okay sharing your screen.
I just want to share my browser. There it is.
Okay. I will let you know when we see it.
Can you see it?
Yes, I can see your browser.
So I can, I'll go over that blog posting first.
Okay, great.
And you'll have to forgive me, I've never,
Chris, I understand that
never typed and talked before.
Oh yeah, it's hard. So
Yeah,
Chris, I understand you've used this before, Cordoba Open, in other projects. And
yes, I was working on this with Selwyn. He was asking, I was trying to find out how to access files locally using Alpha on the device, and he was wondering why I needed to do that. I said, well, I'm using this plugin called Cordoba Open, but I need to point it to a certain location on the device where I want to download the files to. So he showed me how to download those files and get them down to the device so that I could open up the PDF files using Cordoba Open, which basically you would be passing the name of the file that you want to open, any parameters about the file, and it will go get the default application on the device. For example, this is for PDF files. It would open up the PDF viewer on my device, and as I backed out of that, it would bring me right back to my application after. So this is a plugin that I was adding in by hand that is now should be in that Cordoba list now, I believe.
Very
Cordoba
cool.
Open.
Anyway, Sarah, take it away. Sorry.
Right. So with the Cordoba Open, we have this great content here up on our blog that talks about how you can potentially leverage it in your own applications. But in addition to that, we have built articles into our documentation system that document the new open file with native application action JavaScript that uses this plugin to open files on the device.
So not only do we have the plugin included, we've also done the JavaScript programming for you using action JavaScript, so it's point and click. I'm seeing a lot of flashing and stuff on your screen. Are other people seeing that too? Like it's sort of going black, or is it just mine?
Yeah, I was
seeing that. Okay.
I'll try not to scroll things in.
Scroll slowly.
I'll scroll slower.
Yeah.
So if you want to find out more about Cordoba Open, you only need to search for Cordoba Open in our documentation system, and you'll find those articles, the new plugin information, as well as that Phonegap Open File with native application.
Excellent. Oh, okay, good. Okay, another documentation question has come in from the audience, and that has to do with the back button. Do we have a topic on the Android back button yet in documentation, or is that yet to be added? Let's see, back button.
I didn't see it listed anywhere. It's in the release notes. You did find it in the release notes. I'm not sure about the documentation.
Right. It's possible that it hasn't made it in just yet.
But it's clearly on its way.
Yes. We have we're trying to work through all those release notes to make sure they are integrated.
Right. So for now, the documentation itself you would find in the release notes of the software. For people who are brand new, do you want to show people how to find the release notes? Because for some reason it's not always obvious. I can either hand it back over to Chris. Why don't I hand it back over to Chris? Would that be all right?
Oh, I can show you.
Oh yeah, you go ahead and show us.
Yeah,
You're just looking at your
okay.
browser right now, so you might need to share your whole screen.
No, it's in our documentation. If you go to www.alphasoftware.com/documentation and find the release notes section, we link to the current release and the pre-release build, and those will take you straight to those release notes.
Fantastic. Great.
Could you click on current release? And do a search for Android back, I think it was, on Android back.
Do a find in page. I don't know about this flickering here.
One word.
Android back, one word?
Try that one word.
There we go.
Okay, so there it is. There it is in the release notes about the Android back button.
Yep. And that will be prettied up and added to the actual documentation as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Someone is asking us about security issues with Cordoba Open. Could we be passing information we don't want over to another application? I would imagine the answer to that would be yes. There would be some security concerns if you don't control the other application you're sending it to. That may not be a big deal in many instances, but it could be. So if you do have security concerns, to send an email over to guides@alphasoftware.com, and we will take a look at the issues for you.
I believe, though, the component selects whatever you have chosen as a default application to open the type of file. So you have to have something that can read the file on your device. So if it's a PDF file, whatever your default viewer for the PDF file is on your device, that's what will open.
Cool. So someone would like us to take a little bit more detailed look at that. So if one of you wouldn't mind opening up Alpha Anywhere, so we could go to the Action JavaScript set and take a look at what the new things are available for that you take advantage of Cordoba Open.
I haven't even seen it. All my code is by hand. I'm still on a pre-release version.
Don't all jump at once. Sarah, can you demonstrate?
Probably me.
All right, that's you.
How do I change it?
So open alpha anywhere, and you probably will need to change your sharing options so we can take a look at it.
Okay, how do I do this? Sharing.
I was afraid to switch to change the version on my machine just before a demo.
I've all seen how that happens.
Well,
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, there we go. Excellent.
New one.
Okay. So Sarah's building a new UX component just so we can demonstrate this feature.
For the Cordoba Open.
Yep.
I'll just put a button in here. Oops. There we go. It's this open. So you go into your Action JavaScript and you want to find the Phonegap Open file with native application. Action JavaScript, and go in there. And in here we have several things you can do. One, you can choose to open a file that is remotely located on a server using a URL, or reference the file that's on the file system. So the files don't necessarily have to be on the device in order to open them natively.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, there are several JavaScript functions that you can use to handle giving messages or processing information if you want to know if it's successfully or if it failed to open the file.
So I'm guessing, yeah, they don't have an application that they on the device. That's where you can display a message saying, "Sorry, you don't have an application to open this. You need to go get this." Or
Right.
So, question for you: you don't actually choose what application. You just say, "I'd like to use whatever the default application is." Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
I believe so.
And the helper says native if you on the component. If you backed out and looked at the definition again, it said native.
Whatever the native app is for that file. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there it is right there, native.
Yep. Gotcha. So if you had two apps, whichever one the device thinks is the native one is the one that's going to open.
Yeah, because I believe
Because
you have two. When you try to open up a PDF file, you can say use this. On most devices, it'll ask you which one you want to use, and then you have the option of saying make that the default one. I'm not sure what would happen. I believe when I used it, I believe I did have two viewers, and I did believe a question still pops up. So I think your device still works as normal. So if you have more than one viewer, I believe that pop-up will come up and say, well, which one do you want to use if there are more than one?
Right.
Don't hold me to that, but I believe it did.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Well, I'm looking through. We have some other questions. This is not related specifically to Phonegap Open, but this one just has to do with the ETA on the Alpha Cloud. So as many of you know, or if you've attended our webinars, we do have an Alpha Cloud, which is currently in beta, which allows you to publish your applications, not your data, but your applications up onto a cloud where it can be, where basically it runs in a couple instances. So it's a nice secure way of making sure that if something goes down, that your application will keep running. And right now you can participate in this beta program for free. What we do is we actually set you up with an account in which we give you a fictional amount of money that you spend, so you sort of get a feeling of how much use you get out of the cloud. But we have actually started using this for some production applications as well. So while we haven't actually put it up on our website as this is announced and here's how you purchase it, if you're interested in either beta testing or even in production now for the Alpha Cloud, go ahead and send an email to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com, and I'll make sure that you get put in touch with the right person to help you out there. Well, let me take a look and see if we have any other questions related to today's topics. I don't see any, but I do have a question. Oh, actually, there will be a few, but I do have a question for the audience, and that has to do with a website called Stack Overflow. I was just wondering, of the people here, how many of you use Stack Overflow? How many of you use it actively? In other words, have an account with Stack Overflow where you either answer questions or ask questions on the website Stack Overflow. And for those of you who don't know what Stack Overflow is, it's a very large community that is devoted towards helping people out with technical questions. So if you guys could just let me know, just type it into the box. We'll see. And it looks like a lot of people here. A few people ask questions, but it seems like most people are just using it as a resource. But please let me know how you're doing it, because we're thinking of certainly not replacing the message board or anything crazy like that, but we're thinking of joining Stack Overflow and working on that. And just for certain small community things we may do in the future. So, great. Thank you very much for those answers. Let me see, it looks like I have another question here that we can ask. Here's a question. If you made a UX with Phonegap, would it work if you just use this as an A5W page on a mobile device? Who wants to? I can answer that, but Chris, I'll let you answer that.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
All right. If you made a UX with Phonegap, so you made a UX component and you use some of the Phonegap features, would it work as an A5W page, just an A5W page on a mobile device, or do you really need to install the application in order to make it work?
You need to install the application,
right.
At least the way we're working right now.
Right.
Yeah, you have to install the application on the device to test it.
And this is sort of where the Phonegap shell could help you out, because you could use that you could just install the Phonegap shell once, but then make as many changes as you want to the UX and have it just reload inside the shell. So if you have questions about that offline, just go ahead and send them over to guides@alphasoftware.com. We've done at least a couple of webinars, I think, that included that, and I think we have documentation as well that I can point you towards.
And we'll actually be covering a lot of that stuff in the up-and-coming conference, because we'll be doing the Phonegap track.
We will be, yeah, exactly. Also, I wanted to let you know about something exciting before we break today. Well, a couple things. Next week, first of all, we're going to be doing a case studies session with Goodman. Those are the people who supply the air conditioners that you find in so many homes. They have an extensive Alpha Anywhere application, with a mobile application, which they're going to be showing off next week and sort of talk about the benefits and challenges of using Alpha for that particular project. After that, Dean will be back, and he will be covering the new features that you'll see in that PDF that I put in the handout section about version 4.3.2. But then later on, we're interested in doing a type of bigger type of webinar, what we call a deep dive. So instead of these being a 1-hour session, they're going to be a 3-hour session every once in a while that will cover some really more involved types of topics. Alpha Cloud is going to be one of those. Another one will be IIS, and another one will be Alpha Launch. So we'll keep you up to date as to when we're doing those. I think the first one is going to happen around, don't quote me, but I think it's February 8th will be the first one of those. But we will let you know by email what we'll be doing. So than that, we're going to do a slightly shorter session, but if you do have questions, please send them into guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, @alphasoftware.com. So Chris, thank you very much for presenting. Sarah, thank you very much for presenting, and thank you for everyone who attended, and especially for those who asked questions. We hope to see you next week and at future webinars. Take care, and goodbye.